So giddy up. I decided to do a short on a story that was jogged in my memory by talking to someone. This is a great story. So I drove buses for Georgetown University Transportation Society for one summer, and the flattery got to me, so I sort of got sidetracked and started getting kind of off the hook, you could say. But I drove for the 1957 Georgetown University alumni, and they were telling me stories about what they were doing at Georgetown during Prohibition. And it's pretty interesting because they said things like they were hiding kegs in the sewers to keep them cold, and when they would have house parties and things like that, that one kid would go out at night and they would look for police, and if they would stand on the corner smoking a cigarette with a pitcher for the beer at their feet, and if they didn't see any police, they would stick their head down in the sewer and pour a pitcher of beer, and then stand back up and look around, take a puff, make sure there weren't any police around, and then they would pick the pitcher up and run back in the house and join the party. And this was Georgetown during Prohibition, and I had all these close to centenarians on the bus with me. It's about, what was it? Jeez, the bus fit about 40 to 50 passengers. It was one of those old Mercedes buses. So it was like they were telling me these stories, and I'm like laughing so hard because it's like I'm an impressionable college kid, and these guys are like grandmas and grandpas and people like that, and they're telling me these stories, and it was like the total influence deal. I mean, it was like you got these people telling you these stories, and you're like sitting there driving the bus and driving them around their old stomping grounds, and they're having these flashbacks, and it was hilarious because it was like almost like living back there with them. So I said to myself, if I'm doing this, why don't I just get a job driving limos? So at the end of the summer, I ended up working for this limousine company. And the story goes, I worked for a lot of Washingtonians. I worked for a lot of people in Congress. It was a rental So I could end up doing weddings, bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, bar mitzvahs, or driving your average congressperson around the city. And I knew people from princes to paupers, and a friend of mine lived on the street. His name was Breezy. And Breezy was a really elegant, aristocratic personality. He had a lot to say, and he was very talkative, and I know a lot of people who talked. And one day I saw Breezy sitting down outside, and he was really discontented. And I walked up to him. I had the limo. It was a 6-seater Cadillac, really elegant limousine, and I was dressed to the nines because I had just dropped off some of the people that I worked for that night under contract to their fare, and was done for the night, and usually kept the limo. I had these two eccentric bosses. They were almost like working for Hugh Hefner. So I saw Breezy, and I stopped to talk to him, and I always asked him how things were going and what was going on and stuff like that. And he told me this story of this restaurateur who was really arrogant, kind of big, pompous ass of a guy, and that Breezy was sitting near the alley off to the side of this guy's restaurant. The guy just came out and started berating him and denigrating him and calling him names and stuff like that, and cursing him out, telling him to get the hell out of there and go be a bum someplace else and all this other stuff. And I was like, seriously? He was like, because Breezy talked really well and really fast, it was a sight to behold. He was like, yeah, he was talking to me. He was telling me, why don't you go be a bum someplace else? I mean, why are you hanging around here? Get out of here. You're bad for business, and you're this and that. And I looked at him, and I was like, man, that's just absolutely disgusting. So it dawned on me almost immediately to put together a scenario. So I said, come here, man. I said, get in the back of the limo. We're going to teach this guy a lesson. So he was already giggling because he was smart. I mean, he wasn't, people that live on the street, they had homes. And the banksters are corrupt, and the politicians are misusing appropriated funds and stuff like that, spending our money, doing favors for friends so that they can get favors done and live like aristocrats. And so, a lot of times people become homeless due to no fault of their own. And so you never know who you're talking to. I knew mathematicians, brilliant mathematicians, who lived on the street And I knew ex-restaurateurs whose wives had taken them for every dollar that they had. There was this guy in Georgetown, his name was Sky King, and Scotty would mumble to himself all the time because he had been taken for everything that he got by his wife, as the story goes. And so he would wander around Georgetown just mumbling to himself. And I didn't know Breezy's background story, but I'm sure it was something similar to that. So I told him, I said, get in the back, man. We're going to teach this guy a lesson. So I put him in the back of the limo, and I told him what we were going to do, and he already knew what we were going to do. And he was giggling with delight. And I said, we're going to drive up. I said, you show me the restaurant. Was he standing out front? He said, like, yeah, he's standing out front. You can't miss him. He's like this pear-shaped individual. So I put Breezy in the back seat, and I told him, this is what we're going to do. And so the limo was elegant. It was really well put together. And black, 6-passenger Cadillac Fleetwood, I believe. And if memory serves me correctly. So I pulled up in front of this guy's restaurant, and at that time, people liked to ride with me because I could put on the King's English. And I would give them the royal treatment as though they were like a prince or a queen or something. I would say, yes, sir, no, sir. And they would say, where are you from? And I would say, my name is Stefan, and I'm from Washington, D.C. And they would say, yeah, but your speech, where's your speech from? And I would say, I speak English. I was reared very well by my mother. So my mother made sure that I had an exemplary education so that I could make a decent wage and to have a decent life. And people were like enamored with that because it got the tips and it got the raves. And people were always raving about coming back to the city the next year and having me as the driver. So I knew how to put on the Ritz. So I drive up with Breezy in the back seat to this guy's restaurant. He's standing out there and he's smoking a cigarette. And you can tell when the wheels are turning because people's movement becomes staggered. What was fluid becomes preoccupied, and so every movement doesn't end up being as fluid. It becomes staggered or slow. And they're like, I could already see the wheels turning in this guy's head, like, who the heck is this pulling up to my establishment? I wonder. And you could see the wonder and the bewilderment written on his face, even in the dead of night. And so I get out of the car, and when I say dressed to the nines, back then I was a clothes horse, so I had like $300-400 suits, one of a kind cufflinks, silver deco. I had silk ties. My shirts were made by the National Shirt Shop, where you went in and you picked the material that you wanted your shirt to be made out of, and various fabrics of Egyptian cotton and things like that. And you had to, when you got shirts made, you had to order them 4 at a time. So I had custom made shirts, $300-400 suits, expensive cufflinks, silk and satin ties and things like that. And so when I got out of the car, I was already making a presentation. And the guy looked at me and he goes, "Hi." And he's sort of like halfway between the cigarette lowered down by his side and up to his face. So he's like standing there with his mouth open. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, good evening, sir. How are you this evening?" And he said, "Fine, who's that?" And I said, "Excuse me." And I open the door and Breezy steps out. And this guy just, I mean, they say where there's smoke, there's fire. And you could smell the flesh burning in this guy's head where a brain should be, because he couldn't figure out for the life of him what was transpiring in front of him. And it was all I could do. I mean, it was painful to suppress the laugh. But I open the door and Breezy steps out and he says, "Thank you very much. I will be occupied for the next hour and a half. And so therefore I would like you to pick me up at approximately 1:30ish. And I said, "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. I will be here. Thank you very much, sir. I will see you then." And I swiftly walked around the front of the car, got in, and drove off. And I'm telling you, man, it was the most exciting, priceless thing that I think I've ever done in my life. I mean, I know this guy had a total meltdown. He probably went in the bar and his head cocked to one side and he just fried all his circuits, because the whole idea was that, you know, you can't do that to people. You can't treat people like they don't matter. You can't denigrate people and make them the carpet under your feet. It's not right, it's not ethical, it's not human. And it's like, to do that to another person based on your presumption of who they are, or to consider them to be beneath you, is what's the problem. I mean, this society is segregated off into all kinds of stuff. Headbanger, rocker, dorky 10th graders against seniors in high school, butcher, baker, candlestick maker. I mean, you name it. They've got a segregation for it. Upper class, lower class, single family homes against condos, guys who drive Volvos against guys who drive Mercedes. It's all kinds of nonsense and nonsensical. You know, it's amazing the different ways that they segregate this society and just pit one group after another as the enemy or the competition, when it's what it's all about is good people against bad people, and, you know, good humans against bad humans. Every culture has its diversity, every culture has its enchantment, every culture has its charm, every individual has something to add, except the deviants and those who just corrupt themselves, man. Those people are like not worth your time. I mean, really. You know, so my intent was to teach this guy a lesson and showing him that you don't treat people that way, man. You don't talk down to people. You defend yourself against those kinds of people. You teach those people a lesson. If they don't learn the lesson, then give them their own little continent, country, environment to live in. Heaven or hell, man. Make your choice. This guy chose hell. He chose to treat someone he doesn't even know. Just walk up and start talking to people like you know who they are, and that you can just abuse them on a whim, or based on how they dress, how they look, how they sound. It's irreverent. It's classless. It's disgusting. And these people need to be put off in their own little area where they can stew and fester all over each other and leave the decent of us alone. And I'll never forget that story when Breezy got out of the limo after this guy just denigrating the living bejesus out of him, man, and telling him to get out of here and all this other spew. And then I open the door and I'm already dressed the way he thinks someone who deserves respect should dress. And this beautiful, shiny, clean, opulent limo pulls up in front of his place, and the person that he just abused, condescended, treated like garbage gets out, and this guy gets a total culture shock and doesn't know who he just... It's like, who did I just offend? And probably the only thing he was thinking about was, money. What kind of money did I just prevent from coming into my establishment or something like that? But the idea was to treat him, all lives matter, except those who take life and consider life to be insignificant unless you can purchase their respect. So I thought I'd tell this story because of the fact that that's what we're suffering nowadays in 2024. If they're not of our group, then they're the enemy. They're to be attacked. And the only ones that really deserve your scorn are the corrupted, the perverse, the people that are abusing others for their own specific agenda, spewing live and let live. They're not letting people live. They're attacking the very culture, when culture is what it's all about, and it's like, you've got to defend yourself, man. You've got to defend your culture, and you've got to stick up for yourself and take care of yourself against these misanthropic malcontents. I appreciate all the cultures that I've been exposed to, and I've enjoyed them all. I wouldn't want to see them dissolve or fade into obscurity. And I try to help where I can, when I can, who I can. And that night, I helped Breezy, man. I helped him exact a form of revenge against this clown of a restaurateur who treated him like he didn't matter. And he did matter, and he does matter. And people do matter. And, that's one of the precepts of the great faith, is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. and to help the widow and the homeless. And all these opulent, reverent leaders walk by these kinds of people every day. And if they were any help to these people would be flocking to them for fellowship, for community. That's what I miss most, community. I miss community. I miss the engagement of ages, of age groups. I don't like the segregations. I like the age groups, big families, everybody coming together, everybody having a part, everybody helping out, everybody involved, and everybody assisting each other, not for money, but for humanity.